Hi there, and welcome to This Day in History for May 31st. May 31st is the 151st day of the year in the Gregorian calendar, 152nd day in leap years, with 214 days remaining to the end of the year. Today's word is rémoulade. Rémoulade is a noun that means a pungent sauce or dressing, usually with a mayonnaise base and savory, spicy herbs and condiments. I think most of us who are familiar with rémoulade think of it as Louisiana Cajun or Creole sauce. Exact ingredients may vary from recipe to recipe, but it's likely to be made with a mayonnaise base, maybe some hot sauce, a variety of herbs and spices, and usually a little bit more on the spicy side. Horseradish isn't out of the question. One might enjoy a delicious horseradish rémoulade on a steak, or a tangy rémoulade adds a nice burst of flavor for dipping one's shrimp. By the way, so far the only place I saw rémoulade spelled with the accent over the E was in the dictionary entry at Merriam-Webster. Out in the wild we don't see that accent so much. The word rémoulade comes to us from French, where it was a dialect word for horseradish. First known use of the word rémoulade is about 1733. The word rémoulade was suggested by one of my YouTube viewers. And if you have a word you'd like me to explore in the Word of the Day section, pop it in the comments. If I can find it in the dictionary and it's not nasty, I'll talk about it. And with that, most of the states had passed some kind of legislation regarding copyrights within just a few years after the Revolutionary War. The federal government followed suit with the Copyright Act of 1790. This was the first federal Copyright Act passed in the United States. Initially, copyrights were issued for 14 years with the right to renew that copyright if the copyright holder was still alive. The length of time for copyrights has been extended since then. Currently, copyrights generally expire 70 years after the author's death or 95 years after publication. By that measure, for example, books published before January 1st, 1928 would be in the public domain. The Copyright Act of 1790. The Palace of Westminster is the meeting place for the Parliament in the United Kingdom. That's the House of Commons and the House of Lords. This palace lies on the north side of the Thames River, and it's where the Big Ben clock tower is. We've mentioned Big Ben once or twice before, and we mention it today because it was on May 31st, 1859, that the clock tower was completed and began keeping time. This is the birthday of actor and comedian Don Ameche, born May 31st, 1908. He'd taken a dramatics course in college, enjoyed it, so when a friend persuaded him to stand in for an actor who hadn't shown up for a stock company production, he did. And he enjoyed that too. He did a little bit of touring and ended up in Chicago on the radio in the early 1930s and was in Hollywood by the end of the 1930s. Over the next 6 decades or so, I counted over 60 television and movie parts in such shows as The Golden Girls, The Cocoon movies, and Columbo, just to name a few, plus over a dozen stage shows and the radio performances I mentioned earlier. He was married to the same woman for something like 54 years, and they had 6 children. Don Ameche lived to the age of 85. It's Clint Eastwood's birthday, too, and I'm pretty sure I talked about that in last year's episode, so I'll be sure to include a link to that in case you'd like to check it out. Today's song is Before the Next Teardrop Falls by Freddy Fender. Popular in both country and pop, this one was written by Vivian Keith and Ben Peters back in 1967. It had been recorded some dozen or so times before Freddy Fender recorded it in 1974, singing in English and then in Spanish. Freddy Fender's version of Before the Next Teardrop Falls was released in January of 1975, hit number 1 on Billboard's pop and country charts, and we find it at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on May 31st, 1975. Before the Next Teardrop Falls by Freddy Fender. Link in the description. Alrighty, thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share this video with a link in your email, messaging, or social media. If you enjoy this series, you can check out the playlist that contains these videos. I'll put a link to that in the description. That description lives on YouTube, so for other platforms, I'll include a link to my blog page that's called No Really. You can also find me on Rumble, BitChute, and Odyssey. All those links in that description. Alrighty, that's all I can think of right now. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Alrighty, back to work. I think we got it this time.